be here.
It's great to have you here. So this plan is allocating approximately $1.5 million to extend the hours of the Housing and Homeless Hub from 6 p.m. to midnight. Now, the Hub, for people who aren't familiar, is in the Waterworld building on Wyandotte Street East. It's opened during the pandemic. Now, right now, it has daytime drop-in. How will these extended hours help?
Oh, I was there yesterday and saw the impact it will have and is having. So we talked with Marcel, who works the 4 to 12 shift, and talked about the number of people that are able to move into housing. And as a hub, one-stop shopping is needed. So if I'm on the streets, time is a concern. Accessing and moving through the silos of available services that are for me, and having it at the hub provides that space. And so providing extra hours just gives more time for the staff to build relationships, build that safety that's required, and then help folks move into a space where they can find a place to live, have a roof over their heads, and then take the next steps towards being reintegrated into our community.
I want to give an opportunity because people who are maybe less familiar with your involvement, you've been downtown for 14 years.
Yes.
How have you seen things change?
Well, we moved down in 2010, moved home after being away for a few years, and with the vision of, as we as a community, what does it look like for downtown to be a good place to grow up and a good place to grow old? And we love it. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I think the pandemic, the COVID had an effect with the growth and the development that was happening through the first 10 years, took a step or two back. And the opioid crisis as well has been an aggravator, certainly, of increasing challenges that are significant. When you see someone who's in crisis, it can make a profound effect. We were talking earlier, it's not as significant as we're seeing in other cities, and I think that's kudos to the agencies and the city and grassroots organizations that have really rallied together and collaborated in trying to respond to an issue that's national. It's not just a local issue, and how we can find some creative alternatives.
Yeah, I was mentioning to you before we came to air that I lived in another city for quite a while. And when I moved here, I was downtown and I met someone who was living on the streets and they asked me for money. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And they said, no problem, thank you. And I thought, did you just thank me? And I've never met such polite people panhandling.
I think the fear or the stigma we get of folks is this misperception of their motive, and realize they're people just like us, loved and cared by families as much as they possibly can, and changing our imagination of how we see folks or perceive folks makes a world of a difference in shifting that perception, both expectations and then our response to treat them with dignity.
Yeah, and in this report, it talks a lot about how people feel unsafe around the homeless population. You feel very safe. What are some tips that you would have for people?
One of them is just changing the narrative. Instead of the word street, we have tried to use a language somewhat awkward of neighbors. My neighbors have no fixed address. They're still my neighbors. I'm called to love my neighbor, whether they have the house next door or they're in precarious housing. And just changing that imagination I begin to interact with them just as if they're a neighbor. Now, because I live downtown, I'm running into them every place. They move from strangers where we're suspicious of each other towards familiarity, acquaintance, and friendship. And then the response is dramatically different. To say someone's name, to look them in the eye, these are really simple, free things we can do as we engage folks. And treating a person who's on the street, who's displaced, the same way we would treat a new neighbor. The possibilities of engagement and treating them with respect and being in return treated with respect.
And we went out yesterday to try and chat with some folks, some neighbors with no fixed address, about what they thought about this plan or what services they still seem they want. And we couldn't find anybody. And we've been hearing that there seems to be fewer people downtown. Is that, again, a perception?
I think it's a perception. There's no doubt the number of folks that are displaced has increased over the last 3-4 years. But the shelters, the Mission, Salvation Army, the Hub at Waterworld, a Welcome Center, these places that are providing a safe space for them, are full. So folks are taking advantage of that. And then other folks are just finding a friend or a space for couch surfing or providing a safe space to stay off the street.
We've also done a lot of stories since the pandemic about the face of homelessness and how it's changed over the years, especially most recently. And we're not as far maybe from being without a home as we might once were. Are you also seeing that change?
Yes, I think the thin social margin folks have, the downturn, we're still facing the ripple effect of 2008, unemployment, the resources people have when they become down on their luck aren't as thick as they once were. And so folks are just going over the edge when they run into an adversity and they've used up all their resources. Some of us have greater resources than others. I have a rich, thick family of relationships that support me when I'm feeling blue or low. Folks who are down on their luck have had a thin social margin, and we're seeing it now playing out by folks who are displaced.
You've gone through this revitalization plan. Do you feel it falls short anywhere?
First of all, I want to commend the mayor and Ronaldo and the city council as a whole for taking steps into this and creating a strategy and listening. Then commending the city. 3,500 responses is huge for folks who are passionate and love the city and and are sensitive to it. It's strong on the specifics of the first one or two objectives, and then as it moves through, they become visionary and less specific actions that are going to take place. But also as the plan moves down, those become more strategic or structural changes that are going to require a lot of work and a lot of creativity. So I'm hoping we can try creative alternatives, and there's money ultimately in the budget that would provide folks to try, to fail, to learn, and that a local Windsor response is what the mayor would like. We find some solutions here.
We've done lots of coverage lately on some of those unique things, talking about tiny houses.
Yes.
And what about those unique alternatives excites you about giving a better life to some of these people?
I think the innovation, and you can start small. We can start small, and try and learn and see what doesn't work. And there's projects going on across the country that we can learn from, and we've got to be willing to risk on that, and to be able to say, hey, it didn't work, but this is what we learned from it. Tiny homes, ADUs, looking at addressing the whole housing crunch. And so we not only talk about social margin, but it's the cost of living that's a factor that's been so damning to the situation.
What do you want to see downtown?
Oh, I love my downtown. I love the density of the vibrancy of culture. We're talking about Detroit. The event happening there, the farmers market we love. When there's 1,500, 2,500 people coming, you don't notice the same amount of folks that are living on the streets or displaced. So bringing that high density of culture and people living downtown, those would be really key.
Bob, I love your enthusiasm for downtown, and thank you for all the work you've done. 14 years. Can you believe it?
No, it's gone by so quickly, and loved every moment.
We love having you here. Thank you.
Thanks. You're welcome.
Bob Cameron is the executive director of the Downtown Windsor Community Collaborative. It's also called the DWCC. We continue to follow this coverage. Chris Ensing will be in our studio at 10 after.